I hope you're having a good best day today on this fine Friday. Welcome to another episode of Friday Facts with me, Heidi. Now, just first off, if you see any abnormalities or something that I have screwed up, please let me know in the chat or at latest in the comment section below. Because this request is simply due to the fact that I'm using a new piece of software for streaming, and I will be at some point switching software-wise or platform-wise the way I go about and do my live streaming. But more about that in the future. I will be announcing this change. It will also affect certain things or how I run certain things with regards to the cross-platform streaming. As in currently, I'm streaming to Facebook. The Facebook group I have created. Please check my Facebook group. The link can be found in the description box in YouTube in there, and check it out. I'm streaming there. Then on my personal Facebook account for my friends, as well as of course my main platform YouTube, and then the always lovely and cryptic platform Twitch. But that will be announced at a later date and time. So on to today's topic, and that is transvestism. History, fact, fiction. What is it? What it is? What is not? How it came to be? Or okay, it has always been around, of course, yes, but how it has been perceived in the public picture over the years. Now, what I'd like to share with you is, if you want to go about perhaps doing some digging yourself, there is a Wikipedia page. It's rather short. It's really short. It's yeah, really, it's a stunt. It really is. Not much. Here's a Sicilian boy cross-dressing as a Spanish woman, photographed by a German guy. And there is as seen, for example, with the South Indian Yogappa, are sort of cultural, what would be perhaps considered cultural transvestites or religious transvestites. It's and often you'll hear terms transvestites and cross-dresser, excuse me, going hand in hand with regards to as to what it means, what the meaning of the word. What I understand is that when I started digging into this, the first what came to my awareness, really, or the text that I read, was that some decades ago, as I take it in the 60s, during and shortly after, in the 70s, a certain part of the trans community became, because they no longer had to, as much, at least as much as previously, to stick to the transsexual or fetishist sort of stigma, and they left without a word, or a word to describe them, who they are, what they are. So what they in the 70s, and during and after the Stonewall riots in the summer of '69, a term, it was around that time that a term, crossdresser was then really brought to more, or became more widely accepted word for transvestite, because now the transvestite community, what is also known as transvestite community, some part of the community started to find it offensive to be called the word transvestite became offensive to some, and then they started calling themselves crossdressers, and because it was deemed more appropriate for that, and this was due to the fact that the term transvestite was commonly used to diagnose mental disorders, which, being a transvestite, was a shall we say, mental disorder at that time, which is kind of sad, really, if you think. It's the same as being gay was an illness. Being gay and trans was an illness back in the day, and that is the background as to why the term transvestite was it was such a big deal, being derogatory and outdated, which I in some ways can see, but these are just besides the points, really. But if transvestite was a term used to diagnose mental illnesses, and hence wasn't deemed appropriate, then why is being called homosexual okay? Because that was used to diagnose mental illnesses not so long ago, and still is. Enough of a rant. And then the crossdresser was, as I understand it, taken in by the transgender community, and mind you that transvestites were, and in many ways still are, a part of the trans community, but however they are not transgender. And this is can be read further into detail. For example, in a 2006 book, David A. Gerstner, Routledge International Encyclopedia of Queer Culture, Routledge. ISBN number is 0313393680. So you can go find that book by Mr. Gerstner. And then we have a 2011 book by Anne-Marie Baccaro, Jerry August, Megan S. Kennedy, a book named Safe Spaces, Making Schools and Communities Welcoming to LGBT Youth, and from through ABC Clio, ISBN 978-0313393686. These are some of the these are books that I recommend for reading about this transvestite term, transvestite being a historically somewhat derogatory term, which is why some back in the day wanted to get rid of the stigma or not being called by that name. But even now, when I was digging into this topic, I was not aware that transvestite community had at one point and this would have been, as I take it, in at the time, roughly around the time of the Stonewall riots in '69, that they and '70s. At one point, they abandoned or disregarded the term, but I had heard only the term transvestite, and I was aware of the background of it being diagnosed in the past, being diagnosed as a fetish or paraphilia, even up to, as I understand it, even up to late 1990s and even early 2000s. After I think it was well into actually I remember being in a lecture about this. It was well into 2000s, if I remember correctly, that transvestism was considered an illness, or that transvestism was considered a paraphilia and a fetish, which needed to be taken care of, or at least theoretically should be taken care of by psychiatric or through therapy and otherwise. So where did this term transvestite really come from? It first to use, or at least in medical literature, to use this term, transvestism was used by a German physician, Magnus Hirschfeld, and previously he was applied to cross-dressing associated with non-heterosexual behavior, i.e. gay men, which transvestism is still typically sort of connect, or at least some in many ways mentally, or you're in many people just associate it with gay men dressing up as women and then going on about. But I can assure you that there are many straight men who do this, who are transvestites. It's not just gay men. And Hirschfeld was himself a transvestite, and he, in 1910, he wrote a book. Called Die Transvestiten, the Transvestites, and in there and in his works he said that there are three genders. He was ahead of his time, really. I mean, in early 1900s, saying that a Western guy saying that there are three genders, that was quite bold to say. Really, at least in my opinion, it was really bold to say at that time. And he, what Hirschfeld considered as three genders are male, female, and third sex. This third sex was largely non-heterosexual and non-normatively gendered, including gays, transvestites, and transgender people were subjected to this third sex category in this context in early 1900s, which is really how shall I put this, fascinating to think that he was ahead of his time. But by the time Hirschfeld came up with wrote his books, he wasn't the phenomenon wasn't something new. It had been, obviously, it didn't start. It wasn't a cultural movement Hirschfeld started, but it's been, as I understand it, it's been even mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as some sort of paraphilia or a sex crime. But hey, yeah, at Hirschfeld's time, it was the first movement or public discussion of the sort in Germany during the homosexual movement, which is becoming all around. But hey, that's a word, in the Weimar Germany, the transvestite movement started in the homosexual movement, and it has become more and more prevalent, or more shall we say visible in latter years in Western countries. But there has been cultural transvestism in the Eastern cultures. For example, in Hinduism, uh, in India, some males dress up for for God, their Hinduist god Krishna. They as sort of consort for Krishna, or so of sorts. And in Italy, well, we get back to Italy. You'd think that in a Catholic country like, or in Italy, or you wouldn't expect to have this kind of culture. But hey, in Italy, there has been femminili, who are uh, men, uh, men, not always, sometimes gay, sometimes straight, who then um, dress up as um, in women's, or typically what would be considered women's wedding dresses. I think what get what for what reason really, but you know, it's sometimes when it comes to certain LGBT plus culture bits, I'm not quite sure which direction to look, or what to think of it. Hey, I have to take a very short break. See you soon. Hello, I'm back. Excuse me. So, what do we gather from this first bit? Transvestism is not an illness. It's not a fetish. It's an expression of one's gender, an extension of one's own biological sex, and then extending that from what extending what others can see with what you get from what you have, the need within. Now, what would I want? What do I think of the this is, I figured, from a bit more from history. So this has been this, as I said, it's been mentioned. Things like this have been mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, so, as a fetish or a sex crime back in the biblical times in the Middle East. However, it has not always been considered or thought of so harshly. It has also been documented to have been an expression of religious devotion, and sexual and gender variance has been present for thousands of years it's not just something that Hirschfeld came up with 100 years ago. It's been documented that castrated and cross-dressed priestesses of Mother Earth or equivalent had been possible, as I take it from what I could find, dated back to Stone Age, which during which time these had been recorded in Mesopotamian temples, temple records around 3000 BCE. That's 5,000 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. That's a long time ago. It's nothing new, hey. And there are what I could, based on stuff that I could find, there are records from Babylonia, Assyria, and Arcadia, around the same area as in the Mesopotamian realm in near what would be now considered Iran and Iraq, Afghanistan, for example. There have been certain high priestesses and priests in the Mesopotamian and the Stone Age well-known priests, for example, Artemis, Ishtar, or Ashtoreth, Diana of Ephesus, were all with documented cross-dressing or transvestite servants and lesser priests, and Egypt, in ancient Egypt, for example, in 15 and 1400s BCE, Hatshepsut, okay, I butchered that name, but a female pharaoh made it to become a pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt, and ruled 20 years or so, as I think, and then wore a ceremonial beard, male headdress, and a male kilt. If you go online and check what a kilt. If you don't know what an Egyptian kilt or dress it was or looked like, go to Google image search. You'll find it there. What it looked like at the time. So there has been religious paintings of cross-dressing and transsexual. What I'm using the terms as they were used in this context, mind you. And transsexualism in goddess worshipping in ancient ceremonies of China and Japan. There's in at least first millennia BCE, before Common Era, and when it comes to as early as 2700 years ago, an Assyrian king even wore women's clothing I know I would butcher that name, but I'm gonna butcher this name. I'm getting this from the information I gathered. Ashurbanipal reigned 668 to circa 628 BCE. And as I mentioned earlier, the Hebrew Bible prohibits cross-dressing, which I'm not really surprised of. It's in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. However, in Greece, the cult of Dionysus had both male and female cross-dressed followers. You might, in my channel, on my channel, when I do these things, I do not like to go into too much religion for very good reasons. However, I wish to dip into a religious topic. Have you noticed that now that I mentioned Deuteronomy and Leviticus and the Hebrew Bible, and this also applies to the Christian Bible, as well as the New World Translation of the Watchtower Society. Have you noticed on my channel that when there are hateful, horrible, despicable acts of hatred and vile hatred and homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, LGBT phobia of any sort, it tends to be, of course, not always, it's never always, but way too often, it's one of the big three from the Middle East, the three Abrahamic religions. Have you noticed? Then when we go to Mesopotamia, Greeks, Hindu, Egypt, or the ancient Egyptian religion, what we had during the times of pharaohs, those and South American religions. Have you noticed that it's only the big three that are spew out this horrible, vile hatred? Have you noticed? If you have an answer as to why, not always, but often the big three. Let me know in the chat, or if you're watching replay, then in the comment section below. Now, after this little rant, as I mentioned, when we go to, I went through the Greeks, the ancient Egypt, the ancient Mesopotamia, and the Americas in North America. Guess what? I've talked about this actually in the last summer. I was on Agree to Disagree on a debate with some douchebag about whether or not there are there only two genders, or biological sexes and genders as a social construct. I argued yes. And when it comes to the third gender, it's often considered the third gender is sometimes close to what we would consider transvestite. In North America, they have among the Navajo, the Lakota, the Hopi, and the Crow and other nations around the Great Lakes, the Canada to and the Northwest Pacific, etc. On they have what they call two-spirit people that are pretty much on our standards. They are cross-dressers, what we would. And when the Europeans came in, the two spirits were persecuted, and were called a French word, berdache, which is berdache is French for a male prostitute, which is horrible. But that's, unfortunately, that is part of the transvestite history, which is of course sad. And however, there were when it's typically the third gender or the two spirits, as the use berdache tends to indicate. It was the cross-dressers or the transvestites were persons who were assigned male at birth. Hence, when the Europeans were colonizing the North America, they were called berdache, male prostitutes, because they were considered at the time. The French and the British couldn't, in their bigoted minds, comprehend that there would be more than just the binary male and female, and those and more than those assigned male and male or female at birth, which kind of sucks. But hey, those were the days, eh? And there were, and so even though they were typically assigned male at birth, also there were male to female, female to male transvestites fighting in the Native American armies, and it's fascinating, really, to read about these. But I could go into quite a lot of detail on these, but I don't want to have this. I want to babble on for the entire night, because no one would actually watch my shit anymore if I were babbling here all night. By the way, if you wish to cut my babbling with your comments, please comment in the side chat. Those who might be watching or might not, just if you're watching, please post me a comment. Post me a comment in the side chat or the comment section below after this stream is done. So this when the Europeans colonized North America in brutal ways, they were called just they were just persecuted. I'm not sure, based on what I could find, if they were jailed or if it was made illegal de jure at the time. However, in Europe, during the medieval times and medieval and Renaissance times, so the laws were tightened up for wearing or restricting wearing certain kinds of fabrics and those kind of furs and what you unfortunately still see actual fur used, and those were restricted to just certain groups or social classes and ranks who could wear these. Excuse me. And in England, this was most prevalent in England during the Tudor dynasty, or the Tudor kings and queens, Elizabeth I, especially it seems, and in France, Joan of Arc actually is quite curious. She wore men's clothing and she refused to stop. And I was aware that when she was imprisoned towards the end of her life, especially then she was given men's clothing. And then she and it was, yes, it was forbidden at that time in France as well, in the 1400s, and then across Europe it was made illegal, or if not illegal, be made an illness. In 18th and 19th century UK, meaning Scotland, Ireland, and England, the insurgents featured men dressed as women, which is like the pre liberation era, or before it went. It became more mainstream and became more well known in the Western culture. So, and for example, when it started to become more of a thing, or more into people's consciousness in early 20th century, late 1800s, early 1900s, in cultural setting, there were also already females who dressed up as men. For example, Billy Tipton is a good example of this. For those of you who do not know, shame on you. She was a jazz pianist and a saxophonist, and she began passing as a man in 1933, and was revealed as a biological female at his death in 1989. Think of that. I'll use they. So they passed as a male. What does that take? 56 years. That's it. So, there you go. It's not impossible for a transvestite to pass for a half a century. There you go. In a very short while, I will be going into contemporary transvestism. Hello, I'm back. Uh, had to take something to drink. So, let's go. So in modern transvestism, uh, I mentioned the third gender or third sex. It's been, as I mentioned, it has been a really more a religious theme across the world in ancient times, like in ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. But transvestites are or transvestism is still present um, in religious setting around the world, and transvestites, as indicated previously, are typically tolerated very well these days, especially in liberal uh, environments, especially big urban areas. Maybe not Salt Lake City and stuff, but you get the points. Where transvestites and other gender variants or diverse people can better express themselves. In these liberal, typically big urban areas, and outside, and when outside this setting, there is a transvestite presence, if you will, in religious settings in Western Africa, and there are some features derived from these practices in South America, such as Brazil and Haiti, and many of you probably know what a shaman is, but so I won't go into that. But in Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, and Argentina are known to have male to female transvestite shamans, and the sort of figures have been Southeast and Eastern Asia, such as India and Korea, and such female to male cross-dressers or slash transvestites are sometimes serving as priests among the Zulu in Africa and natives of the Arctic, such as Inuit and Koryak people. In India and Pakistan, I previously mentioned that that these castrated and non-castrated transvestites. There are those, and those are known as hijra, of whom some of whom go through go beyond being castrated and have some male to female gender reassignment procedures done, for example, some hormones and such, to get more female body features, shall we say. And it's over there is as I said considered a third gender category, which includes a bunch of other or is a category, really. As a category, it includes many things, more than male to female cross-dressers slash transvestites. In Brazil, transvestis males who take up on female social role, name and pronouns and such, take black market hormones and such, and there have been some popular culture like films, like Beautiful Boxer from '03, and then in as I said, in the Western world, in big urban areas, it's transvestites are tolerated wherever, if in that area in general is more liberal, and that is typically the big urban areas where these more people can express themselves freely, in especially in Europe and the US and Canada, of course. However, I must add that if those of you who have been watching my Monday news episodes in recent weeks, you will already know that the situation with regards to trans people and other gender minorities is going down, with regards to their rights and safety and all that. Go if you want to know, so that there's it's not that much in the US. It's the how much transvestites and other gender people with gender variants are less and less can be accepted less and less, because it's because the general attitude and the legislation is just going downhill. Arkansas, Alabama, etc. are just it's going down. So when I talk about Western world, and when I talk about Western world and liberal urban areas, I typically mean Europe, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Unfortunately, I have to leave the United States out of that. But still, even though in urban areas it's tolerated well, except in the US, it's the big cities are still, the big urban areas are still far few between, and there are luckily there is an online community. You can, if you're a transvestite watching this and you feel alone, there are others, just ding me an email or something, leave me a comment. I'll get you in touch with some resources. I do have contact and information to several different places, to safe spaces and support places. You can take send an email to. You don't even have to call or to have the initiative to call. So just leave me a comment or send me an email. The email is in the description box. Yeah, and there have been of course there's transfer, and more in the public culture there are more and more transvestites or slash cross-dressers people visible and making it more visible and maybe perhaps more acceptable. But I think we'll have to take it day by day, really. Anyway, this is pretty much what I had for you today. It's been an hour or so, just without even without the intro, it's been an hour, about an hour or so. When I'm checking the software from the other screen. Yeah. Those watching, do you have any comments, questions you'd like to ask me before I go? I'll say a few words about what's to come, and meanwhile you can give me comments, questions, etc., etc. As I have said previously in previous, I think it was the last time I said this was on Monday in my most recent episode of Monday News, and that would have been Monday, April 26th. I said and have stated previously that sometimes it happens so that I can't on any given Monday or Friday I cannot do a live stream, but I will do a pre-recorded video of for Monday News or Friday Facts for such show that I cannot make it live, and I'll make it as I've done so far. I'll make it a premiere, so I'll have chats with you, with those watching the premiere, if I just happen to have the time. The next episode of the next recorded episode is this coming Monday, May 3rd. This episode will be recorded because I'm at work at the time. I would be making a live stream, which would be 9 p.m. UK and 11 p.m. my time, because I am a nurse, for those who don't know, and I'm working the night shift. I'm starting my night shifts on Monday, so I can't do live on Monday, and I'll during the weekend I'll record you an episode of Monday News. But I will see you next week Friday for Friday Facts. Or the next time I will see you live is, of course, next week Friday in 1 week. And so, until then, until I see you all live. Until then, goodbye, stay safe and love.